Ever planted ginger only to end up with a tiny shriveled piece that barely grew at all? Maybe it rotted in the pot, or the shoots came up weak and spindly, and you wondered what went wrong. Well, today I am going to walk you through the complete process of growing ginger in containers from start to finish. We are covering everything from selecting the perfect rhizome at the grocery store all the way through harvesting pounds of fresh ginger from a single pot. Plus, stick around to the end, where I will show you how to turn your homegrown ginger into a versatile ginger powder you can use in teas, baked goods, and so much more. Let us get into it. Ginger is one of the most rewarding plants you can grow in a container. It has been cultivated for thousands of years. It was one of the very first crops exported from Asia, and there is a reason it has stood the test of time. The flavor is incredible. The health benefits are well documented, and the good news is that growing it at home is actually much simpler than most people think. Once you understand how this plant grows and what it needs, you will be harvesting more ginger than you know what to do with. So let us start by understanding exactly what we are working with here. Now, one of the most important things to know when you are growing ginger is that what we call the ginger root is not actually a root at all. It is a rhizome, which is a modified underground stem. I know that sounds like a technicality, but understanding this actually matters for how you grow it. Think of the rhizome as the main body of the plant. It stores energy, it produces new shoots upward, and it sends roots downward. When you plant ginger, you are planting a piece of this rhizome, and from that piece, the whole plant develops. So when you look at a chunk of ginger from the store, you are looking at a stem, not a root. And that stem wants to grow horizontally underground, creeping and expanding outward as it produces new growth. Here is why that matters for you as a container gardener. Because the rhizome grows horizontally rather than straight down, ginger does not need a super deep pot. It needs room to spread. The rhizome will creep in one direction, sending up new shoots as it goes, and each of those shoots becomes a new section of ginger. So when you are planning your container setup, you want to think wide rather than deep. We will get into the specifics of container selection in just a minute, but I wanted you to understand this growth pattern first, because it changes how you approach the whole process. The other thing you need to understand is the concept of eyes. Just like a potato has eyes where new sprouts emerge, ginger has growth points on the rhizome. When you look at a piece of ginger, you will see little bumps or nubs, sometimes with a slightly pointed tip. Those are the eyes, and that is where new shoots will emerge. Some pieces will have eyes that are already starting to sprout, showing a little green or white tip poking out. Others will have dormant eyes that have not activated yet. Either way, those eyes are what you are looking for when you select your ginger for planting. More eyes means more potential shoots, and more shoots means a bigger harvest. So let us talk about selecting your ginger. You do not need to order anything special online or visit a fancy nursery. You can walk into just about any grocery store and find ginger that will grow beautifully in a container. I have done this dozens of times, and it works every single time as long as you know what to look for. When you are at the store, head over to the produce section and find the ginger. Now, you are going to see pieces of all different sizes. Some will be small little nubs, others will be larger hands with multiple fingers branching off. Here is my advice. Go for the bigger pieces. The larger the chunk of rhizome you plant, the faster you are going to get harvestable ginger. And the reason is simple. A bigger piece has more eyes, which means more shoots, which means more leaf growth up top. More leaves means more photosynthesis, which means more energy going back down into the rhizome. It is a snowball effect. I have planted small pieces and large pieces side by side, and the difference in harvest size after 5 or 6 months is dramatic. Look for pieces that are firm to the touch, not soft or wrinkled. The skin should be relatively smooth and tight, not dried out or shriveled. You want ginger that looks fresh and plump, like it still has plenty of moisture and energy stored inside. Avoid any pieces that have soft spots, mold, or a musty smell. Those are signs of rot or age, and they will not grow well for you. Now here is a pro tip. Look closely at those eyes I mentioned. You want to find pieces where the eyes are prominent and healthy looking. Sometimes you will find ginger where the eyes are already starting to wake up, showing little green or pinkish tips just barely poking out. That is gold. Those pieces are ready to grow and will sprout faster once you get them in the soil. But even if the eyes are still dormant, as long as the ginger is firm and fresh, it will sprout just fine. One thing I should mention is that some grocery store ginger is treated with a growth inhibitor to extend shelf life. This can slow down sprouting, but it usually does not stop it entirely. If you are concerned about this, you can soak your ginger in water overnight before planting to help wash off any residue. Or, if you have access to an Asian grocery store, their ginger is often fresher and less likely to be treated. I have had great success with ginger from regular supermarkets, so do not overthink this. But if your ginger is slow to sprout, that could be why. Now that you have your ginger selected, let us talk about the container you are going to grow it in. This is where that horizontal growth pattern really comes into play. Because the rhizome spreads outward rather than downward, you want a container that is wide and relatively shallow rather than narrow and deep. I recommend a container that is at least 14 to 16 inches wide. You can go wider if you have the space. Depth-wise, 8 to 12 inches is plenty. You do not need a deep pot because the rhizome stays in the top several inches of soil. A wide, shallow container gives the ginger room to spread and produce multiple shoots, which is exactly what you want for a big harvest. Now, what about material? You have options here. Plastic pots work well because they retain moisture, and ginger likes consistent moisture. Terracotta looks beautiful, but it dries out faster because it is porous, so you will need to water more frequently. Fabric grow bags are another great option. They provide excellent drainage and air pruning for the roots, and they are inexpensive. I have grown ginger successfully in all three, so use what you have or what fits your space and budget. The one non-negotiable is drainage. Your container must have drainage holes in the bottom. Ginger likes moist soil, but it absolutely cannot sit in waterlogged conditions. If the rhizome sits in soggy soil with no drainage, it will rot. I have seen this happen, and it is heartbreaking to pull up a mushy, rotten rhizome after weeks of waiting. So make sure your container drains well, and if you are using a decorative pot without holes, either drill some or use it as a cache pot with a plastic nursery pot inside. One more thing about containers. If you are planning to grow your ginger outdoors in the summer and then bring it inside for winter, make sure you choose a container you can actually move. A large ceramic pot filled with moist soil gets heavy fast. I learned this the hard way. Now I use lighter weight containers, or put heavy pots on rolling plant stands so I can move them easily when the seasons change. All right, let us get this ginger in the ground. For soil, you want a high-quality potting mix that is loose, well-draining, and rich in organic matter. Ginger is a hungry plant, and it appreciates soil that is full of nutrients. I use a premium potting mix, and sometimes add a bit of compost or worm castings to give it an extra boost. You want something that holds moisture without becoming compacted or waterlogged. Avoid using garden soil straight from your yard. It is too dense for container growing. It can harbor pests and diseases, and it will not drain properly in a pot. Stick with a bagged potting mix designed for containers. If you want to improve drainage even further, you can mix in a handful of perlite, but with a quality potting mix, this usually is not necessary. Now, some people like to pre-sprout their ginger before planting. You can do this by placing your ginger piece in a shallow bowl of water, with just the bottom submerged, and waiting until you see roots and shoots starting to emerge. This can take a week or two. Pre-sprouting lets you see which eyes are active before you commit to planting, and it can speed up the process slightly. But here is the truth. It is not necessary. You can plant your ginger directly into the soil and it will sprout just fine. Everything that would happen in that bowl of water will happen in the soil. I usually skip the pre-sprouting step and plant directly. Either way works. Fill your container with potting mix, leaving about 2 inches of space at the top for watering. Take your ginger piece and lay it horizontally on the soil surface with the eyes facing upward. You do not want to bury it deep like you would a potato. Ginger rhizomes sit close to the surface. Cover it with about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of soil. That is it, just barely covered. Give it a gentle press to make sure there is good contact between the rhizome and the soil, but do not pack it down hard. You want the soil loose enough that those new shoots can push through easily. Now give it a good watering to settle everything in. You want the soil moist, but not soaking wet. Remember, there are no roots yet to take up water, so you do not need to drench it, just enough to activate the growing process. I like to check the moisture level after that first watering. Stick your finger into the soil about 2 inches down. It should feel moist, but not soggy. If it feels dry at that depth, give it a bit more water. If it feels wet and heavy, ease off and let it be. For the first few weeks while you are waiting for sprouts, you want to keep the soil consistently moist, but never waterlogged. Check it every few days and water lightly as needed. Now that your ginger is planted, where should you put it? To answer that, we need to think about where ginger comes from. It is native to Southeast Asia, a tropical climate with warm temperatures, high humidity, and plenty of rainfall. The soil stays moist for long stretches, and the air is warm and heavy. That is the environment ginger evolved in, and that is what it wants from you. For most of us in the United States, that means starting ginger indoors, especially if you live anywhere that gets a true frost. Ginger is not frost tolerant at all. Even a light freeze will damage or kill the foliage, and prolonged cold will rot the rhizome. So unless you are in zones 10 or 11, where it stays warm year-round, plan to start your ginger inside in late winter or early spring. Find a warm spot in your home. Ginger likes temperatures between 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit for optimal growth. A sunny windowsill can work, but even better is a spot near a heat source or on a seedling heat mat. Warmth is the trigger that wakes up those dormant eyes and gets the sprouting process started. In a cool room, your ginger might sit there for weeks without doing much. In a warm spot, you will see sprouts emerging in 2 to 4 weeks. As for light, ginger actually prefers partial shade rather than full blazing sun. In its native habitat, it grows under the canopy of taller plants, receiving filtered or dappled light. Direct hot sun, especially harsh afternoon sun, can scorch the leaves. So if you are growing indoors, a bright room with indirect light works beautifully. If you move your ginger outside for summer, choose a spot that gets morning sun and afternoon shade, or dappled light throughout the day. I have mine under a tree where it gets maybe 4 to 6 hours of gentle light, and it thrives there. Once your ginger has sprouted and the weather has warmed up reliably, you can move your container outdoors if you like. Wait until nighttime temperatures are consistently above 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Ginger loves summer heat and humidity, so it will really take off once those warm months arrive. Just remember to bring it back inside before the first fall frost, or be prepared to harvest everything before cold weather sets in. By the way, if you are finding this helpful so far, take a second to subscribe so you do not miss more videos like this one. All right, let us keep going. Once your ginger is sprouted and is actively growing, your job shifts to ongoing care. This is where you help the plant build up that big, flavorful rhizome you are going to harvest. The 3 things to focus on are watering, feeding, and mulching. Watering is the most important factor. Remember, ginger comes from a monsoon climate where the soil stays consistently moist during the growing season. You want to mimic that. Keep the soil evenly moist, but never soggy. I check my ginger every few days by sticking my finger into the soil. If the top inch feels dry, it is time to water. If it still feels moist, I leave it alone. In the heat of summer, you might be watering every 2 to 3 days. In cooler weather or indoors, maybe once a week. The key is consistency. Ginger does not like to dry out completely, and it does not like to sit in water. Find that middle ground and your plant will be happy. Feeding is the second piece. Ginger is a hungry plant that appreciates regular fertilization during the growing season. I like to use a balanced organic granular fertilizer, something like a 444 or similar, applied every 4 to 6 weeks during active growth. You can also use a liquid fertilizer diluted to half strength every couple of weeks if you prefer. The goal is to provide steady nutrition without overwhelming the plant. I have found that consistent light feeding produces better results than heavy doses spread far apart. When fall arrives and growth slows down, stop fertilizing and let the plant focus on maturing the rhizome. Mulching is a trick I picked up that makes a real difference, especially if you are growing in a dry climate or your container tends to dry out quickly. Once your ginger has several shoots up and growing, add an inch or two of mulch on top of the soil. Wood chips, straw, or shredded leaves all work well. The mulch holds moisture in, keeps the soil temperature more stable, and protects the rhizome as it develops, near the surface. In commercial ginger operations, they mulch at planting time, and then again about 2 to 3 months later. I do the same thing with my containers, and it really helps maintain that consistent moisture ginger craves. One more tip on ongoing care. As your ginger grows, you might notice the rhizome starting to peak above the soil surface. This is normal since ginger grows close to the top. If you see exposed rhizome, just mound a little more soil or mulch over it to keep it covered. Exposed rhizomes can turn green and develop an off flavor, so keep them tucked in. Let us talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them. The good news is that ginger is actually a pretty trouble-free plant once you match it to the conditions it expects. Most problems come down to environmental issues rather than pests or diseases. If you notice the tips of your leaves turning brown and crispy, that is almost always a sign that the soil is drying out too much between waterings. Ginger leaves are like moisture meters. When they start browning at the tips, the plant is telling you it is thirsty. The fix is simple. Water more frequently and consider adding mulch to help retain moisture. Make sure your container is not in a spot where it is getting blasted by hot afternoon sun, which can dry things out fast. If your leaves are turning yellow, that usually points to a nutrient deficiency. Ginger is a heavy feeder, and if it runs out of nutrients, the older leaves will start to yellow as the plant redirects resources to new growth. Give it a dose of balanced fertilizer and keep up with regular feeding through the growing season. Yellow leaves can also indicate overwatering, so check your soil moisture. If the soil feels soggy and waterlogged, ease off on watering and make sure your drainage is adequate. If your rhizome is getting soft or mushy, that is root rot from too much water. This is the one problem that can really kill your ginger, and it usually happens when the soil stays waterlogged for too long. Prevention is key here. Make sure your container has good drainage holes, use a well-draining potting mix, and never let the pot sit in a saucer of standing water. If you catch rot early, you might be able to save the plant by removing it from the soil, cutting away any mushy sections, letting the cuts dry for a day, and replanting in fresh, dry mix. But honestly, prevention is much easier than treatment. What if your ginger flowers? Do not worry about it. Flowering is natural, and ginger flowers are actually edible and quite pretty. Flowering does not mean anything is wrong. Some varieties flower more readily than others. You can enjoy the blooms or snip them off if you prefer the plant to focus energy on rhizome production. Either way, it is not a problem to solve. If you are dealing with pests, ginger is relatively resistant, but you might occasionally see aphids, spider mites, or fungus gnats. A strong spray of water can knock off aphids. Spider mites thrive in dry conditions, so keeping humidity up helps prevent them. Fungus gnats are more annoying than harmful and usually indicate the soil is staying too wet. Let the top inch dry out slightly between waterings and they will move on. Now for the moment you have been waiting for: harvesting your homegrown ginger. This is incredibly satisfying, and once you taste ginger you grew yourself, you will never want to go back to store-bought. Ginger takes about 4 to 5 months from planting to reach harvestable size. You can harvest earlier if you want young ginger, which has a milder flavor, thinner skin, and a more tender texture. Young ginger is fantastic for pickling or using fresh in stir-fries. For mature ginger with that stronger, spicier flavor and thicker skin that stores well, wait the full 4 to 5 months or even longer. You have 2 options for harvesting. If you want to keep your plant growing and producing, you can do selective harvesting. Carefully dig around the edges of the container and snap off outer sections of the rhizome while leaving the main plant intact. This way, the ginger keeps growing and you can harvest again in another few months. I do this through the summer, taking what I need and letting the rest continue to develop. Your other option is a full harvest, where you dump out the entire container and collect all the ginger at once. This makes sense if frost is approaching and you need to bring everything in, or if you are at the end of the growing season and want to maximize your yield. To do a full harvest, stop watering about a week before to let the soil dry out a bit. Then tip the container over. Gently break apart the root ball and pull out your ginger. Shake off the soil and give the rhizomes a good rinse. After harvesting, you can store fresh ginger in the refrigerator for several weeks. Wrap it loosely in a paper towel and put it in a plastic bag with the top open. For longer storage, you can freeze ginger whole. It grates beautifully straight from the freezer. Or you can slice it and dehydrate it, which brings me to that bonus tip I promised. Let me show you how to turn your homegrown ginger into a ginger powder you can use all year long. This is something I have gotten really into, taking what I grow in the garden and turning it into pantry staples I can reach for any time. Start by washing your ginger thoroughly. If it is homegrown, give it a good scrub to remove any soil. You do not need to peel it, but you can if you prefer a milder powder. Slice the ginger into thin uniform pieces, about 1/8 of an inch thick. Uniformity matters here because you want all the pieces to dry at the same rate. If some slices are thick and some are thin, you will end up with some pieces over-dried and some still holding moisture. Arrange your slices in a single layer on your dehydrator trays. If you do not have a dehydrator, you can use your oven set to its lowest temperature, usually around 170 degrees Fahrenheit with the door cracked open slightly. Dehydrate until the ginger slices are completely dry and snap when you bend them. In a dehydrator at around 115 degrees, this takes about 3 to 4 hours. In an oven, it might take 6 to 8 hours. The key is that the ginger should snap cleanly, not bend. Any remaining moisture will cause problems when you try to powder it. Once your ginger is fully dried, let it cool completely. Then transfer the pieces to a spice grinder or a high-powered blender. Pulse until you have a fine powder. Pour it through a fine mesh strainer to catch any fibrous bits, and store your ginger powder in an airtight jar away from light and heat. It will keep for 6 months to a year. I use this homegrown ginger powder in everything. I add it to tea, sprinkle it into smoothies, mix it into baked goods, and use it as a seasoning for stir-fries and marinades. The flavor is so much brighter and more complex than store-bought powder. Once you try it, you will want to grow ginger every single year just to keep your supply stocked. So that is everything you need to know to grow ginger in containers and get the biggest harvest of your life. We covered selecting the right rhizome, choosing the perfect container, planting at the right depth, placement and temperature needs, ongoing care with watering and feeding, troubleshooting common problems, harvesting at the right time, and turning your harvest into homemade ginger powder. If you follow these steps, you are going to be amazed at how much ginger one container can produce. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you do not miss future videos. Oh, and if you have any questions or want to share your own ginger growing tips, drop them in the comments below. I love hearing from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.